Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 7, Episodes 12 and 13. They are the season finale combined of the season, and also the series finale, which is, obviously something we don't get to see too often when we're reviewing stuff. Episode 12 is called The End Is at Hand, and 13 is called What We're Fighting For. They are very much separate episodes. At the same time, though, they do both feel very climactic in nature, though, because last week's was very a low-key episode, and then these two are both pretty jam-packed. There's not much breathing room between them. So, yeah, so full spoilers for the two episodes, and indeed the show as a whole at this point. And we're going to get into it with thoughts and feelings. And especially, I think, because having an ending to a show like this has become kind of a novelty. It's a unique thing now, because I've said numerous times that there's very few network shows that have this many episodes that go for years and years, that give us a family of characters that we care about in the way that this does. And obviously shows from the past, your Buffy, your Fringies, your Chucks, whatever, but they've kind of dwindled in existence as time has went on, and Shield's kind of been the last bastion of it. So yeah, so it feels kind of almost just special that something like this still exists in any form, and maybe we'll have it one day again, but there's nothing.
I mean, the next thing on my radar that we'll have this with is potentially Stargirl.
It's weird saying that one season in, though.
Yeah, but it's going to the CW, so it's safe for a while.
It is, but the question is, though, will we care like we do with this if that goes 8 seasons long?
Who knows?
Because CW might ruin it, is the potential.
Yes, one can only hope.
So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff to unpack here. There's a lot of stuff, obviously, Fitz's return. All the timey-wimey stuff that it plays with and does and doesn't do. I mean, we'll get it right out of the way. First of all, there's no big cameos. There's no. I mean, I am shocked there's no Ward of any capacity. I really thought there'd be something with him.
I thought that was a dead cert.
Yeah, I thought that was one certainty to get out of this finale, is that we'd get like a snippet of Ward somehow. But we have a lot of. We have a lot of like complex time explanations of things, and it does this kind of like blow your mind moment where the people in the hazmat suits at the end of season 6 were actually our characters from the future, going back in time and setting things up because it had to be set up and all that jazz. I mean, that's actually the start of the 13th episode. I know that we're really tackling this in order at this point, but it does all that stuff.
In a lot of ways, like, it feels like it's like really high concept, but it's actually almost disappointingly straightforward. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'll say I really enjoyed both episodes. There's a lot of things to love in these two episodes. If I have a complaint about the finale, is just purely that it's not as monumental as some previous season finales. And
yeah, I think it's more the plot side of things.
Yeah. Or even to compare it to other shows, like there's definitely other series finales that feel like they're more like an impact, but more of a bigger deal. And maybe this is one of these things where they already kind of had a series finale at the end of season 5, which is actually very similar to Buffy, and that Buffy then again had to come back season 7 and do the ending again.
Yeah.
And this kind of has some of that going for it as well, where it's doing an ending after it already kind of had its perfect ending. And there's a lot of it that I think really works. There's a lot of it that does really well. But it's interesting that this does take like just 10 minutes, 15 minutes even at the end of episode 13. Like the actual conflict wraps up fairly early in the episode, and then we have this sort of epilogue segment that takes place with them all having this sort of digital meeting in the
a year later.
Not quite the mainframe, but essentially the same tech, I assume.
I assume you meant framework.
Framework, sorry. It's been a while, right? It's been a while since we had the framework.
They mentioned it. If it wasn't in these episodes, it was last week. It was recent that it was mentioned.
Oh, they probably did, but it's just, it's been a while since it's been on my brain, since it's been a regular feature. So, I mean, the actual conflict with the villains, ultimately, we kind of always expected it to be the one of the weaker things in the finale, just because the villains have been kind of, like the final's fine. Cora being a part of that is fine. But it's not been the best villains they've had in the show, not by a long shot.
No, I think this side of it is probably my biggest disappointment with the episode. And it more just feels like, okay, we spent the whole season with this plot, and I'm like, oh, I mean, it kind of not whimpered out, but it felt very easy at the end.
It felt more straightforward than I thought it was going to.
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say. So, yeah, episode 12, broke down into a couple of things. The crew who were on their way up to the alien ship. We have a lot of stuff with Mac and Sousa kind of like sort of holding the fort at the ship at the Zephyr. A lot of time for them to banter. And there was a lot of good humor, I thought, especially in this first half. The running gag about we're going to save Simmons, and someone goes, Andy? He's like, sure. It's the same thing happened again when Deke actually sort of interacted. He says, hey, we're going to get you Simmons. Like, and me? Like, sure. and you. There's this running thing, and you have, Matt kind of making fun of Sousa for some of his language, his old-timey language, and then sort of like...
Peachy, I think, was one of them.
But he double backs on it and says, you know what, no. You're you. It's good that you're you. That's what makes you different. Stick with it. Like, he sort of like changes his mind. I'm not going to try and correct you because honestly, that's what makes you Sousa. That's what makes you special. So let's just go with it. A lot of fun pieces like that.
On just this section of the episode where they're doing the rescue, what is it with these last couple of episodes and taking shots at Quake in general? Like, as a superhero concept as opposed to Sky. We had the joke about the name. When she came into the rescue this time, and Simmons obviously not remembering her, it's like, what is that costume you're wearing? Or outfit? I can't remember if she used costume or outfit. But again, it was
costume.
Like,
yeah, I don't think Sky would have been upset with outfit, but it was the word costume that kind of.
I think it was costume. Yeah,
got her.
And it was just like this feels like out of nowhere to be taking shots at this, like right at the end of the show. Yeah,
I don't know what's going on there. But there's a couple of nice little tidbits. I did enjoy the solution to everything because there's a big joke moment. This does genuinely remind me of a joke from the first episode of Angel, the spin-off, of course, to the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Can't bloody help yourself, can you?
But there's a joke in the first episode of Angel where Angel's in fighting vampires and saving Cordelia, whatever, and Doyle, the character who's been interested in that episode, decides that he's going to try and help with the saving. And all the fighting is taking place in this big fancy mansion, and Doyle decides he's going to ram the gate with his car, and he gets the car in gear, he rams into it, and the gate just doesn't budge, and he just kind of nods and goes, good gate. And it's a really funny beat, and essentially the same thing happens here where Matt's like, I'm going to blow these hull doors wide open, and he the big rocket missile launcher turns, he whacks the button, and it fires, and then it's just nothing. And so it's like, you got anything bigger, anything more exciting. But I like the solution to this, though. The visual of having the Chromicons that they'd taken out, which was a callback to very early in the show. The stick thing with the concussive blast.
Yes.
Yeah, that was something way back. Someone actually posted I saw a screen cap of it being worn. I could have told you who used it, but I remembered it being a thing because the visual of it happening was kind of stuck in my head. And so they have these 6 Chromicons, like, hey, they tried to use themselves to fuel a explosive, earlier in the season. Maybe we can use that to make a big boom.
Have some mini nukes to blow off a door.
Yeah, which they do, and honestly, all this stuff was fun. There was a lot of action, in both episodes. It felt kind of non-stop at various points.
Yeah, some better than others. There was a point, I think it was in the second episode where they're all fighting a bunch. I think it's Mei and they're fighting Chromicons.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, just like 3 episodes ago, the whole gang couldn't take down Enoch, like on his own. Like that was a repeated gag in the time loop. And
true.
This it felt like a really easy fight, like in comparison. I'm like, it felt weird.
Maybe Enoch's just that much better than.
I mean, if you want to tell me that, then sure.
Even though the whole thing is that Enoch was never, because there was 2 types of Chromicons, and he was the scientist version, right? And then the other ones were the warriors.
He downloaded the hunter packages to be better, but I mean, you're assuming these hunters are the best ones here, that they'd be all right,
I don't have an explanation for this, I have to admit, but it's that's the ending. Whatever, just go.
I know it's the sort of thing where normally I wouldn't have complained about it, but because they did it as a repeated joke just a couple episodes ago, it was kind of in my mind.
Okay. The other characters, Yo-Yo, Coulson and Mei, are in the lighthouse. They're trapped there well, after they're trapped after the first explosive goes off, because Garrett's teleporting around planting explosives, because the lighthouse is unique in that they can't just blast it from the outside.
Yeah, I think they blast it a bit, which is why there's kind of some rubble, but...
Yeah, but then Garrett, obviously, he's planting all these explosives, but they kind of predict where he's going to go next, and they have Yo-Yo put the magic cuffs on him, which were designed for Gordon, which is why they've got them lying around, which is nice. But I think the more noble thing in between all these beats is just something as simple as they're waiting for Gordon to appear, there's a little moment between Mei and Coulson, sort of like just kind of reflecting on who they are now and like how they became this. And obviously Coulson died and now he's an LMD. Mei having all these feelings and the empath abilities and whatnot, and just kind of like comparing who they are and sort of reminiscing on it. There's a lot of that throughout these 2 episodes, even before we get to the big epilogue, where obviously that's all it is those kind of character beats. And I think that really sums up what this season, even these last 2 seasons in a lot of ways is that it's more about just saying goodbye to the characters for 2 years than it is about the plot actually being the front of what this is supposed to be doing.
It is. It's why I don't want to say a problem. The epilogue section in general kind of just bothers me. Like, I like all the content in it.
Okay.
It kind of just, like I said, it's a good 15 minutes. It feels a little self-indulgent almost when, like we acknowledge, this whole season at the very least feels like a goodbye. So kind of just sit there for 15 minutes doing the epilogue felt a little bit much.
I guess I don't really have a problem with that. If anything, after 7 seasons, they deserve 10 minutes to be self-indulgent. I think.
Sure.
If I have, again, just to go back right to my one complaint being the overall feeling of the villains and the plot not feeling that important. I guess the reason why that is my one complaint is because at no point, and this is something that I have felt in several Shield episodes in the past, and especially in almost all of the season finales, is I never really felt like anyone was at risk at any point. I never felt like anyone was in danger or that
to a real fault in this one.
Yeah.
And I know you want happy endings for all your characters. Right?
I do, but I want to believe that they may not get them first.
Right, and I think there's the moment where Sky's fighting up on the ships.
Yeah, she's fighting with Nathaniel, and and a lot of that fight was great. This was maybe the only time I've seen her all season really use her Quake abilities in like a fight and doing fancy jumps and whatnot.
The action, the choreography of it was fantastic. No complaints on that. But the actual the big climatic beat at the end, where he's like, you can't win, without taking us both out, like a suicide mission, and she's like, well, maybe that's the idea, and then it's just fine. Like 30 seconds later.
Yeah, and
it felt like I needed to believe that, and maybe even she should have gone, actually played the sacrifice. Who knows?
Which is weird because she's the one character I expect to show up later, maybe in other Marvel things if they do want to take anything from this. So she's
the easiest one to transplant somewhere else.
So it'd be really weird. Even like the epilogue stuff with her, like I could almost buy a Disney Plus show based on what they set up for her and Sousa. Like that, okay, well there'll be a show, Quake, the Final Frontier. I don't know, I don't know what you'd call it, but
no,
something.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, like there's some obvious paths to take there. I mean, it's just this thing where it was very reminiscent of some other visuals we've had in the show of people floating in space after she did the whole blast, and I liked the moment itself because it was very reminiscent of her Quake origin. When she first like broke out of the Terrigen like crystal, and or the rock. You know what I mean? Like when she cocoons. And it was a very similar thing where she did essentially the same sort of motion and blast. The music, her theme played and the entire ship went, and it was like, oh, this was a big moment. But then you have her floating in space, and they kind of set up, because obviously Fitz showed up at the end of episode 12, right? And this reveal was kind of weird for me, because it was like, well, obviously it's going to be Fitz that's came out of this portal. Who else are we waiting on?
Yeah.
Like, well, if anything, it'd be way more exciting if it wasn't Fitz, and then Fitz somehow showed up another way.
That would be a great little beat, because you spend the whole thing going, where's Fitz, and then the portal's like, here's Fitz, and then it's not. That would drive me crazy in the best possible way.
Joe, I think the other thing that maybe hurt the helmet coming off moment for Fitz is that we already had this moment in season 5, because he'd been missing for a few episodes at the start of season 5, and there was that thing, and it wasn't even so much that he took off a helmet, because he just turned around, I think, in that, but it was very reminiscent of that, where we were waiting for Fitz for 4 or 5 episodes, and he finally showed up. So having like him appear like this, where you don't see his face and then he reveals his face, It's like, it felt too reminiscent of that. I almost wish that he just walked into the scene, or we heard his voice or something first.
I get that.
As a different tactic
I think
to
this is
introduce him.
part of my problem. It feels a bit safe, I guess, as as an ending. Like, like, I kind of like pretty much everything, all the beats, but like, I said, there's no real risk. There's no surprise in this episode, really. Like I say, oh, Fitz. Of course it's Fitz. Who else is it gonna be? Everyone survived. Oh, of course they all survive. There's no real. There's no real surprise to it all. It's just, okay, here's an ending that pretty much you could have called.
Yeah, and if you were hoping that they were going to tie in any way to, the MCU or reconnect it in some way or do anything with it, they didn't. In fact, they almost played it like almost annoyingly vague because they just didn't know how to connect, or they weren't allowed to know anything to connect to. So everything just feels like, are we back in the main timeline? Are we not?
Yeah, it's almost disappointingly easy in the sense of just all that timeline shenanigans, which it's just back to normal. Don't worry about it. It's kind of like just restoring the status quo for the ending, and just don't think about it. And
I don't actually blame the people behind the show for that. I mean, it's not really their fault that they couldn't tie into things properly. It never has been their fault, so that is not on them.
Like some of the closest kind of referencing does come in this episode, I would say, or these episodes, is the 084s, because that was like a whole thing back to
that
was the tease for the Thor movie was the first, the post credits one, whichever was before that, because it was, we've got an 084, it was the hammer, that was I think the first instance of that I can remember.
I think even more importantly than that, there was episode 2, I think, of the show was called 084. That was like episode 2 or 3.
Oh, yeah. Right in terms of just this show, but even like to connect to the wider MCU, I think that like code has significance.
Or even the technology that Fitz uses to go back in time and the device he builds, it feels like it's kind of like not a million miles away from the stuff in Endgame with like how they travel back in time. There's maybe that's intentional. Maybe it's just a happy accident. I'm not sure, but anyway, the point I was getting to though is that Fitz, as soon as he appears, and he's like, "Hey, oh, it worked." Because for Fitz, this was instant. Fitz basically just traveled through time and he wasn't anywhere really. He was just in transit the entire time. And he shows up here at the start of episode 13 because at the end of episode 12, they're back at the bar after all the Shield locations have been destroyed, of course, and all these different characters Shield agents have been told to come here with this device that they've been guarding throughout their family for the last several decades. Basically, Enoch's been leaving a trail of like devices that Gemma can then assemble in the bar, and it reveals this device, and that's how Fitz get blah blah. So one of the things Fitz says is, "Oh, tell me Cora survived. Cora's key to this. Like Cora's key to the whole thing." And it seems to be from later on that the reason why she's key to all this is that Daisy has to sacrifice herself, and Cora has to be there to bring her back. Cora has to be there to heat her back up. After the whole explosion thing, which feels a little bit easy in the sense that I mean, okay, fair enough, she has to heat her back up and she's got some healing qualities, but I mean, I don't know, vacuum of space is pretty deadly.
You can survive in space in a vacuum for like 20-30 seconds. That's a scientific fact.
Oh sure, but it felt more than that to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how long it was because they were playing it like slow motion.
Yeah.
So I don't actually know how long it was supposed to be.
I mean, it's deceptive because obviously in a vacuum, any signs of the explosion itself, other than the debris, of course, would be gone pretty quickly. But it has that effect where it feels like it happened a long time ago because it's just lots of debris floating quietly. But obviously it's space, so it would happen quite quickly. It would get to that point. Yeah. So it's very deceptive. But it's one of those things where they brought her in, and I just kind of felt frustrated. Like, okay, she's going to be saved now, and I didn't necessarily feel the. I guess the way to phrase it is I didn't bite on it. Like there's this thing in storytelling where you logically know that a character who's teased to die is not actually going to die. It's something I thought about a lot in wrestling, actually, where beforehand, like because of where the story's going, 99.9% that person A is going to beat person B. It just makes sense for the story for where everything's going next, right? But you talk about when there's like a near ending to the match where they almost convince you that person B might actually win, and you call it biting on the pinfall because you almost believe it's going to happen. You almost believe they lull you into this false sense of security where you believe that maybe it'll happen. And it's the same thing in movies and TV shows where, yeah, of course these main characters, and all it's different than a finale like this because I mean they could kill anyone technically, and in theory, but I never bet on the Daisy death. I never bet on her actually dying here or sacrificing herself. I assumed immediately that she was going to be okay, and then immediately she was okay.
I agree. That was a bit of a problem. And like I said, I think the better choice would have actually been to go through with it, and let alone just convince me that they might, but actually do it might have been more impactful.
Yeah, I could see that. I see that. Now, obviously, I feel like we're nitpicking a lot of things. I guess because in my head I went into this thinking it was going to be perfect, and
because do you know what the problem is? The season 5 finale was perfect.
And for the record, so was 4 as well. Like, I mean, we've often talked about the last chunk of season 4. In fact, I'd say the last chunk. 2/3 of season 4 are the pinnacle of this show.
Oh, that is the peak. And the reason I specifically said the season 5 one is because that was the ending, right? In the way that this is supposed to be.
But
so
if I go back to the finale of not just the season 4 finale, but also the finale of the middle arc, the L&D arc, like I remember being so on edge because of what may happen to the characters. Again with season 5, and this finale is really fun. It does a lot of great little beats with the characters, and they're saying goodbye. But it does kind of feel like a little hand wave to the audience, as opposed to a real sort of final story beat. As opposed, it doesn't feel like I'm actually like worried about what's going to happen. And I haven't really felt that all season. It's not really been a problem. It just stuck out a little bit more here in the ending, because I felt, well, the ending's where it's like we're actually going to be.
It's going to kick off here.
Yeah, it's actually going to be at risk and whatever. And I did think it was a bit weird how like Garrett is convinced, he's basically shown that Nathaniel doesn't really care about him, because Nathaniel's willing to let him die in the explosion, and immediately Garrett's kind of like, hey, I can help you guys teleport out of here, like I'm on your team now, because clearly I can't trust this asshole who convinced me that I should trust him. And I mean, maybe it's a bit of a stretch to call it beginning of redemption per se, but then when they teleport to the bar, these SHIELD agents who are there immediately shoot Garrett, and it's this dark moment where, oh god, any of them might get shot here. And then when they realize they're all SHIELD agents, one of them's like, oh god, did we just shoot one of our own? And then one of our team goes, he was a traitor anyway, it's fine. I was like, well, that's a bit dark.
I mean, he was just coming back around.
Yeah, like I get that from the future you've seen him do a lot more awful things. Older Garrett, you've seen a lot worse. Yeah. But I mean, it felt a bit. It's like...
No, I agree. It was a bit weird. I have a question. Were we supposed to recognize a lot of these SHIELD agents?
No, and I think that's a fair question, because
it kept playing like whenever they stepped forward with their piece into the light.
Yeah,
it looked at their face. There was a big, the music swelled up, and I was like,
because
am I supposed to know them?
I was genuinely wondering if like someone that we were going to recognize from a movie or something was going to just walk into the light, and they never quite did.
No, but even like aside from my expectations of that, the way it actually played every time it revealed someone was as if I was supposed to know them. Like it played it like this is someone important, and I'm like, I don't know who this is. It's just a random person with a briefcase.
I think that's okay, but I in the sense that I thought that, okay, so you've got all these people in shadow, one by one they're stepping into the light. I'm not recognizing them. I thought it was building up to the one who was actually going to be recognizable. Like there was eventually going to be one at the end who that's the one we know. That's the one they've been teasing for the last minute or two, and it never quite happened. There was never like that person.
Yeah, and again, this isn't really a problem that there's not someone there. It was more just the way it was shot and presented that built those expectations.
Yeah. I did love the whole idea of Fitz and Simmons spending years together, which was kind of teased previously, but I think that's a wonderful little idea. They actually spent a long time together, and I don't know why I took my own horn here, but I thought it was pretty obvious we're building up to them already having a kid who was several years old. Just because of the way they talked about spending this time together. And it made it, I was thinking back to Simmons, yelling and crying when she was sort of remembering things before everything reset. And I like kind of the twisted, because sometimes when they tease something really dark like this, and then it feels like they don't actually give you the thing that feels equally dark enough, it feels like a cop-out. I actually think this is a really smart thing they've done here, where it sounds like something really bad happened to Fitz, the way she cried out in pain. And then what she's actually remembering is that she's left her own child in a box in a jungle being protected by Piper and Flint, which, by the way, I love seeing those two again. That was a nice little...
Yeah, I'm all for that.
Yeah, that was a fun little thing. In fact, honestly, the funniest thing out of these two episodes might be that Piper's reward for protecting... Which, I mean, she didn't know she was protected at the time. Simmons is very vague and says, hey, I'll give you anything you want if you protect. But the reward that Piper gets is an LMD of Davis. Which, as we hear from Yo-Yo, is already regretting.
It's very on brand.
It is the most wonderful callback to their character, because obviously there's been no Davis and Paper all season. Davis because he's dead, but
Yeah.
But it was just a wonderful callback to those two characters. I did, Deke staying behind in the other timeline when they have to come back. Especially the way he announced it, I thought was pretty good as well. Because Sousa's making this big speech, and he's holding Sky's hand, and he's like, I'm a man out of time, and blah blah. And he's about to go into this big monologue, and Deke's just like, I'll stay.
Yeah. Very funny, and because his final beat is everyone's gone. And all these other shield agents goes, "Are you our leader now?" And he just like smiles to himself and goes, "Yes." Like he's relishing it.
I saw a wonderful bit of fan ficting here online. Ficting rather than fictioning. I'm going with ficting as now as the...
Yes, that I was about to question.
No, I know what I'm doing.
I'll let it slide, and then you addressed it yourself. I'm like, good.
No, I'm doing this intentionally. I like it, ficting. But that... you may not be aware of this, but there was actually like a TV movie in the early 90s, maybe it was late 80s, where David Hasselhoff played Nick Fury, and there is now some believed headcanon online that this Deke grows up to be David Hasselhoff, Nick Fury, in this era.
I'm all for it.
And it's the most wonderful thing I've ever heard in my life. My only disappointment with the Deke stuff, because I think this is a wonderful send-off. He's kind of an anomaly in the timeline, so it made sense. I mean, something so Sousa to an extent, but I kind of love it. My only complaint, and this is not a real complaint, but my only minor complaint to this is that later when they're in the circle in the meeting in the epilogue, and they bring up Deke, and Max says, I'm sure the D's fine. He's probably playing Madison Square Garden right now. My only problem is that it didn't, just for like 2 seconds, just cut to a shot of him on stage with a crowd, just with some ridiculous pose or something. Just something stupid.
I would have loved if in that virtual meeting they just had an extra chair with a lemon on it. I think that would have made it for me.
That would have been good. But no, and, it's funny because obviously I think emotionally the Fitz and Simmons stuff did hit the hardest. Maybe it's because we've not had Fitz all season. Maybe it's just because they've always had the best emotion.
I was going to say, I think they've always have the entire show. They have, since the start, been the heart of the show. So I don't think this is a surprise that their stuff hit the most here.
Yeah, I almost, in a way, wish that they'd restructured this a little bit. So the episode 12, not 13, because the finale can't be this, but the episode 12 was just an episode focusing on Fitz and Simmons. Because that moment where it reveals they have a kid, and then it sort of goes back to all those previous scenes that they showed earlier in the episode, and it's like, no, and this is the kid was there too, and just kind of camera just sort of...
Yeah, they really didn't have him for shooting long enough, did they?
I feel like if you'd had a whole episode of their story building up to that twist and reveal, I think that might have really hit... I mean, it hit pretty well, don't get me wrong, but it would have maybe have hit like a really great beat.
I agree.
Otherwise.
Yeah.
So, no.
Bless you.
Yeah, it was coming. So, and I don't. As the thing, like, I feel like we're sitting here and talking about all the things that aren't perfect here. I don't want this to come off too negative sounding, because I think this is very satisfying as a finale, as a goodbye to these characters. I think it works wonderfully well. I
think the reason that we sound negative, I came out and went, that was nice.
Yeah, it was nice.
And it was nice, and it was, and I liked it, but it wasn't like, oh, that was so good. It wasn't like, this isn't ranking in best show finales of all time, is it?
No, show finales is a weird one, because I think there's a lot of shows where their finales aren't necessarily their best finales. I think comparing it to this show's own season finales is maybe a more fair thing to do, and there's definitely a few that I would rank higher than this. There's no even a question. Season 4 and 5, definitely. 3 probably as well.
3 probably, yeah. I'd say probably all of those. 2, I can't remember exactly well enough. I'd say this is better than 6, for sure, because that wasn't...
Fair?
Yeah, it was kind of on the same level as this.
Yeah.
In what it was doing.
Yeah, that's fair. I think, I really want to emphasize that I'm not down on this. I had a lot of fun with it, and I had a lot of fun with all the character payoffs, and giving them all their happy endings was something that was nice to see. I think Mei being a teacher now at the academy, which is now called the Coulson Academy for anyone.
Yeah, at first, when they were talking about a new job, when they were just teasing it at first, I was like, so it's teacher or therapist? She's putting that empath ability to good use.
Well, no, a teacher I think works even better, because her Andrew, her husband, was a teacher.
Yes.
So I think,
it wasn't a complaint. It was more, those were my first immediate thoughts.
Actually, speaking of Mei, I did actually love her getting to say when she drops on the ceiling, because I think the villain's like, oh, what's next? And then she drops in and goes, the cavalry. I was like, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It's that thing. It's that cheap pop of calling back to like early in the show. And,
I mean, they did that earlier in the episode as well when she was flying, and I can't remember who said, someone said, oh, that was some good flying. She goes, oh, that used to be all I did.
Yeah, well, that was her thing. She was driving the bus. That was what she was hired
exactly. For. It's all this just referencing back, and again, like I say, I'm not negative on this. It's like a solid 7 out of 10. I was just coming in expecting a 9.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And then Cora's whole thing. I think I'm fine with her being a good guy by the end and obviously saving her sister. That's all fine. And I like them using Mei's empath abilities. Like their whole plan, rather than commit genocide on the Chromicons, is to give them the ability to feel just like Enoch did, just like Enoch was able to do by the end. And use Mei for that.
A little surprised none of them were still terrible and evil. Like just because they had feelings,
Oh sure,
humans can be terrible too with feelings.
Yeah, but that could be a whole season if you want to go into some of them are good, some of them are bad.
It could, but I would have liked just for that beat when they're all like, no, we're all friends. Just one of them maybe resisting and the other Chromicons turning on them, maybe. Just a little beat like that. I don't know.
I mean, maybe them saying they're friends was maybe a bit too in the sweet side. I think maybe what I would have liked, rather than go down your path, because I get why you wanted to do that, because it'd be more realistic. I think maybe a more poignant thing would just be for them to go, I don't know, and just end it there. Just end it with this confusion, because
them having to internally debate these things for the first time and showing that would be enough for me for sure.
Yeah. So but no, I like Mei's wrap up. You got Max got a helicarrier of his own, so that's
wearing
nice.
A very Furious trench coat.
Yes, noted that. And Yo-Yo's working with him. She's sort of like a field agent for him with Piper and LMD Davis. Flint's at school with Mei. We mentioned Skye being in space with Sousa and her sister. They're off making first contact or something. Something to that effect. Fitz and Simmons have just retired and they're raising their daughter. Deke's mum, presumably.
One would assume.
Yeah. So, that was delightful. It's one of those things where, like, the small part I question about this is that they meet together and it's been a while, and I'm like, they make this choice to, okay, let's make this a tradition, we'll get together every year, but then they have to end the meeting like within 10 minutes, because it plays out in real time. There's no like cuts ahead as if they've all been talking for hours, and I'm like, really? Like, you
don't want to see each other like next week?
Yeah, this feels like just once a year for 10 minutes. Come on, like. Why? You're a family. You even said that's what you said. Like, that was the thing. That's what you're fighting for. You're fighting for family. That was the whole big reveal. And for Fitz and Simmons, literally, there was a daughter, therefore family. So I don't know. It's one of those ending tropes where we all have to separate now. I'm like, well, why? There's no reason why you actually have to separate.
And they do the thing where everyone logs off one by one, and everyone keeps talking without them. Like, just, it gets a little more personal each time someone leaves the circle.
Yeah, actually, to give it props, I think the best line of the entire finale, maybe even of the season, is when Skye's talking about her sister doing better. She turns to Coulson, and this is kind of, because when it comes to the emotion of tying back into the start of the show, the actual heart of the start of the show, the driving force from a plot perspective and character perspective, was the idea of Coulson believing in Skye. So when Skye turns to him and says, it's amazing what you can do when someone believes in you, to him, it's kind of touching, because it kind of touches upon what the actual story was at the start. And, so I really like that line. I thought that worked really well. And we have the ending, of course, of Coulson flying off in Lola. They tease it beforehand, of course.
It was nice. As soon as you see, because Mac's like, hey, I left you something. He's like, yeah, I got it. I'll open it up. And you see the keys, and you know immediately what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little fan service farewell, and that's nice. It's good at that, and I'm so glad these last 2 seasons happened. There's so much to cherish in them. Time loop episode was fantastic. In fact, I think the time loop episode was better than this episode. I think Enoch's ending and sacrifice played better for me overall than this episode did.
Yeah, I probably agree with that, and I think that's why, even though I don't love necessarily this ending, like I say, it feels kind of safe. It's nice. It's like fan servicey, like you say. I would take these 2 seasons and have this as the ending over, just having season 5 ending as the ending. Because even though that's objectively a better ending, as a last episode, that show off, that having that big beat to end on. There was 2 seasons of great character interactions every episode.
Oh yeah, and, it was fun and it was funny as well. I mean, I mentioned before that. Actually, I was in the comments. Someone we're talking about season 6, and I mentioned that the funniest moment of the entire show is from season 6, and that is of course Mac finding the Daisy fantasy on the computer. That moment.
I think we spoke about it earlier in the season actually.
That moment is by far the and this show has a lot of funny moments that repeat, and this couple last episodes had tons of them. But that moment, I don't think I have ever hurt myself laughing the way I did in this show at that moment. That was perfection of comedy. In fact, one of the things it reminded me of, because there's the montage at the start of the final episode, it's like this previously on, but it's doing this kind of everyone's introduction kind of flashback for the previously on. And when they got to Deeks and they replayed that moment from that same episode where he looks at the camera at the end. Remember his introduction where he's walking around his Google style office, and it ends with him looking at the camera because he's so cool. And it made me laugh again. I was like, oh, that's that moment.
It's still funny.
It's still funny. These characters are wonderful, and this is why I say that it's unique to have this type of show exist in its form, because all the good shows, even the shows I love, all the shows I love now that are good and great, they're all these shorter seasons, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. For the most part, shows don't need to be 22 episodes and so on.
This is one of the rare exceptions that manage to pace this amount of episodes consistently.
But the thing is, though, is that there's this lost art form of having a 22-episode season where you have your core season arc, which plays out over, say, 8 to 10 episodes that are sprinkled throughout. Obviously, at the start and the end, primarily, and then mixed in the middle. But then you have lots of your story of the week episodes as well. In Buffy we called it the Freak of the Week because it was always a different monster or something, early on at least. And you have the sense that not only do we have the overall plots, but you also have this sense of the characters. Yes, they went through adventures for a long time where they worked together for a long time. So even though you're not doing the core story every episode, you have this sense of building up a history with the characters. So by the time you get to the ending and you're saying goodbye to them, it does feel like you've been through a lot of shit with them and not just the main plot.
It is. And I think the time that you spend watching it matters as well, rather than just because 22 episodes, it's nearly half a year in terms of just weeks. And then once you spread that over an actual TV season, it feels like a lot longer. You have your summer break, whatever, but it feels like 2/3, 3/4 of the year that you're spending time every week, give or take, with these characters. And that attachment grows in a way that I don't know if it's ever going to be possible for like a Netflix binge show to ever achieve, because here's 10 episodes, you'll watch them in the space of at best 2 weeks, and then watch them again in a year's time, when the next lot come out. I don't think you can ever form that attachment in the same way.
Absolutely. It's this art form that I think is worth preserving. Like all of these different styles. I mean, there's so many shows that try to be this many episodes and fail. Look at the CW superhero shows where they make an arse of it, but it's just because the writing's not good. It's that simple. But there is an art form to doing it this well. The shows that made me fall in love with the art of television were this. It was Buffy. I mean, I'm just saying this to bring it up, but it was. That was the show that made me fall in love with TV.
Earlier, obviously we brought up Buffy. We brought up Chuck earlier. Fringe. These sorts of shows that are longer seasons, and not every episode is a standout episode. By no means. But you've got, we're spending time with characters. It's why ultimately, people like a lot of just long sitcoms, 8 to 12 season sitcoms, whatever, because we're just checking in with the characters every week. There's no plot in most sitcoms, right?
Oh sure,
that matters, but it's more just, hey, let's see what the characters are up to this week.
That's why a drama like this is so effective, when you can combine that attachment and long form, like not storytelling, just long form like companionship, and then mix it with an actual plot. You have this thing where not only do you have the attachment, you then have them in these life, because sitcoms don't have life or death situations, not usually anyway, but if they do, it's funny. It's not a real life or death situation. But in a show like this, there's been moments where when Fitz got stabbed in season 5's finale, it was like heartbreaking. It was like, and in the back of my head, we were all like, oh, there's another Fitz in space, and we were sort of thinking ahead. But that was a moment where you bit, because you knew. You knew that there was another Fitz. You knew it was safe. You knew that this was getting undone, but it didn't matter. The moment lands. Absolutely, it absolutely did, and that's just good storytelling. It's overcoming the preconceived notions, even when they're usually right. you still overcome them with good storytelling. It doesn't matter that you're
even if it's just for in the moment, even if it falls apart when you stop and think about it. If it succeeds in the moment, then it works.
And Shield has been wonderful at this since the start. And we're kind of just talking about the show as a whole now, which I guess makes sense. It's the ending.
This is the last time we're going to get to talk about this in this way.
And Agents of Shield, from the start, it had that rocky. It's so funny how it followed the pattern of a lot of these good network shows with the rockier first season, but you see the potential and it hits its stride. And like a lot of these shows, it has that. I mean, this one's kind of a weird example because it had that very specific moment when Winter Soldier came out where it turned immediately, and even the end of season 1 felt so different compared to the rest.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point before that in season 1. I think the episode was Tracks.
The train one, yeah.
Yeah, where that was the first episode where I remember going, oh no, there was a notable uptick in quality all of a sudden. That was about episode 10-ish maybe, where I kind of went, that felt like a step up.
But if
that felt like we're going in a direction.
If I could just look back though at these other shows we're talking about, Buffy, season 1, there's a lot of things. I mean, I go back, it's different when you go back already loving the characters when you rewatch it because you have this connection already, so you have this weird passion with them anyway, so it doesn't really affect it much. But Buffy season 1 is definitely not where it really becomes Buffy. Season 2 of Buffy is where it really becomes Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Fringe, right?
Yeah.
There's some good teases in season 1, but there's a particular sort of beat about halfway through season 2 where it really becomes Fringe, and all of a sudden it's exciting and exhilarating because you see this is what their plan is, this is what their game plan is, and it starts introducing all these things and playing with this element that it's introduced is wonderful. Chuck's even maybe even a kind of more interesting one in the sense that it doesn't have like a specific plot thing that it does. It just all of a sudden felt like it was clicking in season 2 in a way that it didn't in season 1, and I cared about the characters. And like some of the comedy which came off maybe a little annoying in season 1, I'm thinking, I forget his name, but the best friend character, the short guy. There you go. Like, I remember thinking he was kind of annoying in season 1, but in season 2, all of a sudden, I was kind of rooting for him a little bit.
It's kind of endearing. And I think that's part of writers kind of looking back, assessing, toning down qualities, playing up others, looking at what works and what doesn't over the long form. I think network shows have an advantage in this sense of, compared to, a lot of other things where they're released, by the time, we're watching episode 3, maybe they're only on episode 9 or 10. There's still, half a season for them to, right, we can already start tweaking things. So you get this gradual change sometimes over a season rather than this immediate shift. Like, I think Shield was probably a good example here with Tracks, where that was like episode 10, 11. So you've got a bit of the season after they've had some reactions where, they're not, immediately changing everything. They're not throwing things out, but they're just tweaking, all right, we got feedback, we get what people like, what they don't, what's working.
Well, one of the weird things,
start molding.
One of the weird things about network shows, especially later on, and I'm thinking like Shield and even like Fringe and Chuck's era in this, in the 2000s, is that it was almost like they had to like do the generic network TV version of something to convince the network to put it on the air, and then they had to slyly turn it into the show they actually wanted to make. I know that sounds really cynical, but it kind of feels like that with a lot of these shows, especially where some shows like Fringe start off so, case of the week to a detriment, but then by the time you get to season 3, all of a sudden it's like almost every episode is part of the main plot, and they're not doing that anymore. And it almost feels like that's kind of really what they wanted from the start. But at the same time, it does benefit from having that earliest days of like, it's just an interesting story every week to explore. It builds up this history.
It builds up accessibility as well in those early days. Just repeated beats of, here's how the character reacts to this situation and this situation. So that by the time you get to season 3, let's say, where you want to just do your story, you know how characters are supposed to react. So these beats land better. They can get more subtle.
Yeah, and obviously, a lot of the best shows right now, I'm thinking recent years, Mr. Robot, your whatever. A lot of these shows that are cable or streaming, they are some of the best TV that's ever been made, and they're exceptionally good at what they do, and they're tight, and they're full of all these different things. And obviously, I do see that kind of as the pinnacle in a lot of ways of TV, but I almost see this type of TV as a different genre. A different medium almost, I guess, is maybe a more fair way to say it.
It's like if I'm going out for a meal, I could go, I could go to a really fancy steakhouse. I could pay, a lot and get something, really good. But sometimes I just want a greasy burger from the takeaway.
I don't think comparing this to fast food is a fair comparison.
No, sometimes that greasy burger it's just better, right? Sometimes that's what you want. And I think, and I feel like that's the same with this sort of TV, where okay, is it objectively as good in the same way as like those other shows where they, like you say, they're probably the pinnacle of TV, but sometimes I want this.
Well, it depends. I mean, I think this is a flawed comparison because I feel like I think it almost discounts to say that this is almost always inferior to a better done streaming or like cable show, where I would happily take. I mean, I think the rating in Shield is way better than a lot of shows that are trying to be those premium things.
I'm talking about compared to the good ones of those still.
Okay,
like, because I mean, on that same comparison, you could go to a really shitty steakhouse that's just doesn't cook your steak properly how you want it, and you're like, this is really, really disappointing and bland and unseasoned, and you go, well, no, I'd much rather be in that takeaway burger for sure, like every single time.
No, I think that I like this comparison because I feel like it works for movies to a point where you're saying about a dumb blockbuster. I don't think there's anything about the skill of actually making a show like this work over the years that it works. It takes talent, and there's so many bad network shows that you can see why it doesn't work and why a lot of the talent that is good has migrated over to streaming shows and cable shows, because we've sort of seen that. There's, like, why isn't there that many good network shows anymore? It's because a lot of the talent moved elsewhere because they felt like they were getting more freedom and they weren't constantly worried about their shows being cancelled. And this was a show that was on the bubble for a few years. Like, we got lucky the last couple of years where they gave us these early renewals, but
3, 4, and 5 we were worried for sure, and then it was at the end of 5 where they told us, okay, just the last 2 and wrap it up.
I remember season 2's finale, watching season 2's finale, being worried that there wasn't going to be a season 3.
Yeah,
I remember that.
It was 2 as well. You're right. Yeah.
I remember having that feeling, and it's something
I don't remember in 1 if they'd announced it or not, or if I just didn't have the same.
Yeah, I didn't care as much.
I mean, once okay, if I get it, great. If not, I'm not as bothered.
Yeah, and I remember feeling that almost every year with Fringe, every year with Chuck. It was a constant thing. I wasn't as in the know when I was watching Buffy, so it wasn't something I felt then. Same with Angel. Like, it wasn't until after that I kind of became aware of the cancellation renewal cycle.
It's
and all
if you
that.
go back and watch our previous reviews for the end of season episodes, we talk about it every single time. Like, oh god, is this getting renewed? I mean, even sometimes the last 2, 3, 4 episodes of a season, it kind of creeps into the conversation of being like, oh god, this better get renewed. It just slips in because it's on your mind all the time.
Yeah, that's the thing that comes with these types of shows that's worrying. So I want it to be clear, I want both types of TV to exist. I always want 2 or 3 good versions of this format to exist in a given year. I really do. And unfortunately, this is kind of the last bastion. I mean, you mentioned Stargirl earlier as being kind of maybe a hopeful possibility, because it had that feeling in season 1 where obviously there's a concern of it moving to the CW properly now that maybe they'll ruin it by making it more CW-esque, but
right now that's what I'm pinning my hopes on for this feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
This weekly kind of the weekly networky feeling, and it's not even that they're both superhero shows, because that's not what connects them.
Oh,
in this
not
sense.
at all. No,
it's
I agree.
The format that because Stargirl, technically when it started, it was DC Universe. It's a streaming show, and immediately it's like, this feels like a traditional network.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be on CW for sure. But if you told me Stargirl was an ABC show, I'd believe you.
Yeah. So it's So obviously we had a bit of a tangent there about this type of TV storytelling, but I think Shield is a really special example of it. And it's not just that it's good because it was the only example left, and it was like something to cling on to, rather than because it was good on its own merits. It was good on its own merits, and it stands up there with some of the shows of its kind. So, and I'm going to miss it. I'm going to miss looking forward to this every year, and it was that sort of thing. I think probably somewhere in season 3 where I realized how special it was. Probably around the episode on the planet with Simmons, and then later Space Time in that same season were both fantastic. And you realize one day you're gonna have to say goodbye to this. Yeah. I think that's where I really started worrying about it going forward, and then season 4, was this new pinnacle, and 5, they maybe had to stall a little bit because of the budget reductions in the hallways. In fact, there was even a joke in this finale. Yeah. Max like, "Oh, I'm sick of hallways."
Yeah, me too.
I got a view, so that was I am thankful for my time with this. I am thankful for all the characters that I cared about. And
I'm just a little disappointed they didn't break my heart. In some ways.
Yeah, I could have been more stressed. in this couple of last episodes, and maybe that was a lot to ask for, given like they'd already pulled a lot of tactics already. Maybe anything might have felt like it was just repeating the same old tricks. But there's a lot of beats that I do love, and I do love Fitz and Simmons taking time to just live, because they're always under threat of being pulled apart. They're always under threat of being killed. It was kind of nice for them to say, you know what, it's a time machine. We can finish this in 5 years and then do it. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And something that I think is important to stress is that we're like, oh, we like this episode. We're not it's not the best episode ever, but I like it. But the most important thing is, unlike some endings of stories, this doesn't diminish the show as a whole. This doesn't make me ever worry about rewatching. I'm like, no, that's fine.
Not at all. It's a fine ending. Lots of things to be happy about. But yeah, it's not a standout episode or finale of the show. If we do sure, maybe we should do a top 10 soon. I don't know. I've never thought of that. But like, if I'm doing a top 10 episodes, yeah, this ain't going to be there, and that's fine. Yeah. That's okay. Like, it has 7 seasons of episodes to dig through and pick. If I am picking episodes from this season, yeah, the time loop episode, and let's be honest, the Mac and the D is
those are the 2 episodes that stand out in this
that
season.
May be a top 10 for me. I don't know, I'd have to really go through and see what the rest of my list would be first before I could say that for sure, but it may be a top 10 for me.
You'd have to actually compare it, but it would immediately make the to be considered list.
Yes. If I'm doing a short list to then consider and break down, that one's on there potentially.
Whereas, this ending, these 2 episodes technically, I know immediately, no, they're not in consideration for the best episodes. They're good episodes, I enjoy them, but they're not up there amongst the best. I know that automatically. Yeah.
So, no, that's S.H.I.E.L.D. That's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. This journey has come to an end, and I'm sad to see it go. It'll be a shame not to be able to look forward to it. It's funny, because obviously Mr. Robot ended back at the start of the year. We only got 1 season of Better Call Saul left. It feels like a lot of the staples that we review on this channel have either came to an end or are coming to an end in the next, I mean, obviously Saul will take a little while because of the whole, pandemic will slow down the shooting of the final season, but it does kind of feel like a lot of the things, if you said to me a couple of years ago, what are the big shows that you guys cover on the channel, I'd have said Mr. Robot, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I'd have said Better Call Saul. I mean, Twin Peaks was really only 1 year, but it felt like a huge deal for that 1 year.
I probably would say Westworld, but our enthusiasm for that has waned a little bit.
Yeah, that definitely dipped down, unfortunately. But there was definitely like a series of like 4 or 5 staples, and I think that all of them are basically. In fact, one of the interesting little tidbits, I don't know if this is obvious from a viewer perspective on YouTube, but Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the playlist for this show for our reviews is the first playlist that was ever created on this channel. So this ending is kind of special and because we started doing the individual reviews for season 3. There was technically old reviews and other things for season 2, but those are long gone. But the individual reviews started with season 3, and so there's obviously that onwards in that playlist. So that was the first playlist that was ever created on MailFuzz TV. And it's and now this is the last thing that'll ever go into. I mean, unless we do like a top 10 or something, then maybe that'll go in.
Yeah, who knows? But I mean, you say the coverage of what we do is kind of different now. Like, looking forward, I don't know what our next kind of regular staple shows are really going to be. That these are the ones that we're excited to talk about every year. That when we get to the end of the year and we do our top 10 shows, that these are the ones that are fine for consideration.
It is. I mean, it's kind of exciting in a way, because that means that it has to be new things, and hopefully there's going to be shows that take the mantle and capture imagination.
We've got things like The Expanse, but I think there's
Expanse. Yeah, I'd say I think Expanse is the one that kind of feels like a crossover thing, where it feels like we're all in the middle of that.
It does, and I feel like though part of that is a little like it's moved to Amazon, which not that the episode quality has changed or the writing has changed. It's exactly the same, but going back to what I was talking about earlier, the time spent with those episodes is just fundamentally different going forward. Yeah.
But at least we did that for a couple of seasons, so it has some of that. Because you can't take it away now. Now that we did that for a couple of years, you can't take it away.
Yeah, it's why, if anyone doesn't know, me and Pete, we review, the old Trek shows. We're working through them. More or less every week we do an episode, sometimes 2. And it's kind of imparting that feeling, right? It's taken us years to get through a couple of seasons of the original series, some movies, and a couple of seasons of Next Gen. It has taken us 2 or 3 years now, I think.
We started January 2017.
Right, there you go.
And we just started season 4 of Next Generations. Obviously, the one big thing we have, of course, is that there's no gaps between the seasons, unlike real life.
But that consistent, just checking in every week or so, again, because sometimes we'll take a week off, here or there, and it feels a bit like, okay, there's no episode on this week.
Yeah.
And there is that where it's mimicking this feeling of forming these attachments to the shows and the characters in a way that if because I got the Blu-rays right there, I could just sit and watch through them like I do anything on Netflix, and just binge through, episode every day, 2 a day, whatever. But it wouldn't be the same. It just, I know that.
Yeah. So here's the Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., the, at least for now, last bastion of good network TV. As harsh as that might sound, and I mean, I'm sure there's a network TV that people do like, but the purely procedural things don't appeal to us. We're not into your cop shows and whatnot. Your cop, lawyer, medical dramas are not for us. Barring something that's exceptionally well written and has a lot more to say than just here's a case this week.
Usually aren't on networks.
No, that's where you go to the HBO for like The Wire and things like that. So, it's tough to say goodbye to such a wonderful band of characters. And if I one of the little jokes, I know some people are probably turned off by now because we went on a tangent about just TV in general, but I loved that they brought up something that happened. Them all either dying or turning into zombies, and they mentioned what happened to Mac, and you was like, wait, I don't remember this. Was I here for that? Because Yo-Yo did start a little bit later than Mac did, and I loved that little reference to that time. And then of course Coulson's like, hey, if we're playing a game, if we're racking up points here, I've died like 7 times. I win. Shut up, all of you.
Yeah, it was funny just them rolling around like, Mei died and Sky died. We all kind of died at one point or another.
Yeah. So it's good. It's good. So there you go. Season 7 finale, series finale, and we are done. Sad to say. So if you are interested in checking out anything else we do cover, if you want more stuff to watch along with us, obviously there's a lot of playlists of all the things we've been doing over the years. We did for a long time do the CW DC shows. We did them individually for a while, and then we did 2 seasons of all the shows as a podcast called Television from the Multiverse. We quit that just at the start of the year because we basically got to the point where, barring like 1 or 2 of them, we hated all the shows. And
I was having to get borderline blackout drunk to watch them, to get through them, and that wasn't good for my liver.
No. So yeah, that said though, there are other good superhero shows that I would well worth recommending. The Boys is coming back soon. Season 2 of The Boys is hitting next month, and season 1 of that was surprisingly really good. So maybe check out that. We're currently working through Umbrella Academy season 2. Which we've not been super hot on, even though the consensus seems to be quite positive on it. We've been kind of more middling on it, so I'm not necessarily recommending that per se, but just it's there if you want our reviews.
You may enjoy it more than us based on the general consensus.
Yeah, Doom Patrol is very good. I do recommend that, which just finished its 2nd season, and we did enjoy Stargirl. It's maybe not something that will necessarily appeal to you if you like this show, because it is different. It's definitely more of a teenager, bubbly kind of thing.
It's closer to Buffy than it is to this.
Yes, but obviously nothing's as good as Buffy, so the quality's not
obviously
there. Yeah, just making that clear. As good as what's his face? Got it, Luke Wilson. Yeah,
yes.
to be saying, as good as Luke Wilson is, he's not Rupert Giles. All right, it's just this is the point I was trying to make.
Sorry, I was like, I didn't know how to help you there because I don't know who you're reaching for.
I was like, is Luke the right one? Right, because I couldn't remember the other one's name, and I'm like. And if I'd remembered the name Owen, I'd definitely not Owen, because he's not an Owen. But because I couldn't remember what the other name was, I was like, oh my god, is Luke the right one? But yes.
You could have just played it safe and just said Wilson.
The Wilson, yes, the Wilson brother. So these are the other sort of comic booky shows that are either just been on or currently on. We try new ones typically when they start, and we keep them based on if we're interested, if we like the pilot, that sort of thing. But there's other shows there. We mentioned, Mr. Robot, Twin Peaks, all these sort of things. We try a bunch of shows. We have a look at them. So if you're on the YouTube, Mailfuzz TV, maybe have a look at what else we've covered. Check out some of the pilots of what comes up when they're starting new stuff. In fact, just this coming week from HBO, we have Lovecraft Country, which we'll be checking out the first episode of. So
very excited for, if it lives up to expectations.
Yeah, so maybe have a look at that and see if you're interested. But yeah, so Yeah, so I'll just plug in some new stuff because I mean, if the only thing you ever watch was is Agents of Shield, I might as well try and plug some other shows we review, in case you're interested. We also have movie review podcasts and all other sorts. Go have a look.
Comic book review podcast.
Yes. Although not for Marvel, admittedly. We're a DC Comics podcast, but
At least for now.
yes. No. Let's not hit the crisis button just yet.
I will say no more. Do you know what? Actually, there was a joke in this that felt very DC, and I can't. And when I watched this episode, I went, that felt like a DC reference, and now I can't for the life of me remember what it was, and that's really going to bug me.
Oh, Joe, we never talked about the fact that Fitz seemed to be willing to just let this timeline die. He's like, oh, we'll just go back to our own timeline, and everyone else is like, no, we can't just leave them here with the Chromicods. We have to save them first. We have to take the Chromicods with us. If it's like, oh, okay, right, I suppose, if you insist.
Which begs the question as to why Cora was key.
What do you mean?
I mean, because they brought all these ships back with them, right?
Yes.
To their timeline. So I mean, did Daisy need to sacrifice herself as much in the original timeline?
Yeah, because that's how they. Well, okay, I see what you're saying. Because originally, if Fitz wasn't planning on bringing all the ships back, they wouldn't have to actually destroy all the ships. They'd just escape. Okay, interesting.
I mean, maybe there's something I'm missing here, very obvious. There probably is, because it seems too obvious, but now I'm just stopping to think about it for a second. There's something not quite clicking in my brain.
Time away, me, okay? Just
sure. I'll let it slide.
Just go with it.
I'll go with it.
All right, that's
like I said, it didn't matter in the moment, and that's what counts.
Yes. So yeah, let us know what you thought of the finale and the comments below. Do like and subscribe, all these stuff. Like is very important on YouTube. It's what gets us more people finding us and all that sort of thing. So you can do that. You can support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month. So please go and have a look and see if you're interested in that. Get us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?